Hello to our esteemed viewers. You're most welcome to the Cornerstone Market Insights. We're here with this week's news on the following topics: the bond auction, which took place on 15th July. We have insights on the shilling versus the dollar, our foreign exchange rate, and how that affects us as a nation, to our investors. And we also have insights on the CFA Society conference that was recently held. We would also like to share the insights that were shared there. Yes, my name is Michelle Wanyana, and I have my colleague
Robinson Sentongo.
Yes. So, beginning with the bond auction, bonds, treasury bills, are government securities that Ugandans are interested in, which have low risk. We had an auction, as I said, this past Wednesday, and there are certain results that came out yesterday, and we'd like to share what those results look like, what it means for our investors, and Cornerstone, and every Ugandan in this nation as a whole. Yes, Robinson.
In this bond auction, there was a lot of speculation leading up to the auction. People were wondering if there will be demand. Of course, I know there was high liquidity in the market, but there are some new bonds which are yet to be auctioned in September. So the question was, will this auction have enough demand? And yes, the demand for government paper continues to be high. And we saw in this auction, 2.2 trillion was tendered by the investors. That's what they bidded. That compared to the last bond auction, where 2 trillion was bidded. Still, you see that demand is still high for the government paper. Well, if I look at the auction results, the most interesting here was the 20-year bond. We're looking at it in the last auction. The 20-year bond came out at 16.5%. But this time we saw it at 15.95%, much lower. And also the rejections on that particular bond were also massive. Investors brought 852 billion looking for this bond, but the government accepted only 291 billion. That is the bid to cover ratio of 2.8. Those are massive, massive rejections. And then there was also a 10-year bond in this same auction, the one that matures in May 2037. On this one, 826 billion was bidded by the investors, and 401 billion was accepted. That is higher, or it's almost double what was accepted on the 20-year. And this particular bond closed at a yield of 15.45%. Again, I've mentioned this before. The 10-year bond and the 20-year bond, the spread between the yields is really narrow, in my opinion, because if you look at 15.45 on a 10-year and 15.95 on a 20-year, that's a very, very narrow spread for me as an investor. So that could also explain why in this very auction you see that more was accepted by government on the 10-year bond. Never know the investors were much more lenient while bidding for that because of these narrow spreads between the two.
Okay, that's interesting. You mentioned that certain bids were rejected. That speaks to the liquidity in this country, meaning investors are looking for where to put their money, which securities to invest in.
Yes, but Michelle, there is dollar, shilling, and fuel prices. Well, we've been seeing a previous depreciation in the dollar, and the dollar has lost a bit of value. We've been seeing the shilling gaining traction, and people are also wondering if the shilling is gaining traction against the dollar, why aren't our fuel prices reducing?
That's an interesting one, because the dollar currency is one of the most powerful currencies worldwide, and that obviously translates to how it affects our country's currency. Yes, there has been inflation in the US, which has depreciated the dollar, and in theory that translates to the shilling having an appreciation. But unfortunately, that is not directly the case. That does not mean our fuel prices will drop the next day. We have to watch how that inflation is going to be in the long run. Then maybe our fuel prices will start to drop. But then that's not the only thing that affects our fuel prices. We look at our transportation costs, right? We look at the taxation. We look at so many other costs that come into play. So yes, the dollar has depreciated, but there are so many costs that come in from where we import our fuel all the way to our local petrol stations. Yes, that's something that I think we should keep in mind.
Yes, that's right. We're not going to see an immediate drop in the prices. If global prices remain high, we shall also see our prices stay high. But at the same time, also geopolitical factors like wars can also contribute to this high fuel cost that we are seeing. For example, the conflict that's going on right now.
We mentioned earlier about the bond auction. We mentioned how so many bids were rejected. That translates to the fact that Ugandans have money. So it seems some people are poor alone. But yes, for those who do have, there are insights that were shared at the CFA conference, which was held this week. And investors are encouraged to put their money in other securities, other income-generating ideas, which were shared by different panelists. But Robinson can share more about that.
Yeah, there was a CFA conference on 15th. Cornerstone was present. We were at Sheraton Hotel, and the Chimere was super. But this was a conference that was talking about alternative investments. We know the government bonds, the safest investments in the country, and this is something that you could find. Someone said over 70% of the investments in the country invested in government bonds, and maybe a bit of it in the stocks. But at this conference, they were discussing how alternative investments can broaden our market. Some of the things that were discussed, for example, are private equity funds, talking about venture capital. This is for businesses that are unable to access the public markets, to be able to go into the private markets and raise capital. And there was also a session dedicated to tokenization. Tokenization is interesting because this one involves transferring ownership rights of assets, both physical and digital. Transfer them into tokens that are traded on a blockchain. And that's something that these people think that can also broaden our market. At the same time, there was another discussion about AI, how AI can also come in and impact. Different people had different views. Okay, will the AI make people lazier? Is the AI as good as me, an investment analyst? Will it give good enough analysis as well? Well, different people had different views. A certain speaker bashed AI and said, no, AI can't handle. Those are some of the things that were discussed. At the same time, also real estate was highlighted. I think we had someone from Val Real Estate talking about how what is needed to invest in real estate, what it looks like, and how it can be also a channel to help people diversify their investments. As earlier, I mentioned that most investments are in the government bonds and stocks. The major argument here was that these alternative investments can be a means or a tool for diversification for investors. So the investor who is out there, well, I also encourage that let's be open and look at these alternative investments as a tool to help us diversify our portfolios. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us in the Cornerstone Market Insights. We'd love to see you next week.
Thank you.